Pisello, the ROI guy.
Hi, this is April Morley.
And welcome to the Value Coffee Talk podcast.
This podcast is a service of the Enterprise Value Collective, a community for business value-focused leaders and practitioners, and is sponsored by our value consultancy, Genius Drive.
And our mission is to help accelerate and optimize value articulation in each of your customer engagements and throughout the customer lifecycle. Today, we've got a very special guest, Bart Fanelli. He is a seasoned CRO, field and revenue ops leader. He's had under his belt now one IPO and two unicorns, if I'm keeping track right and keeping score. As well, he's an executive advisor, entrepreneur, and most recently co-author of the book, which you definitely have to get, The Success Cadence, Unleash Your Organization's Rapid Growth Culture. Bart, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the intro. And I'm so pleased to be here. Happy to be collaborating with you all today. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, customers have evolved. The economy remains uncertain. What are some of the top challenges that you're seeing as a result of this when it comes to customer engagements in sales, customer success, and throughout the commercial team?
So interesting. It varies, obviously, depending on who we talk with. But for me, there's a constant theme based on what we've all experienced over, let's say, the trailing 4 years, where markets have changed, funding mechanisms have changed, the needs of companies that are either starting or scaling or even enterprises have changed to the point where the conversation has to be so real and on point based on what value you're going to deliver to your prospect or customer, or it's discredited. We've almost now come full circle where if you're not threaded in value in almost every aspect internally within your business, and then externally as you're facing clients and prospects, you're going to fall behind. People buy, they do all of this research and they have all of this detail. It's all out there for them to consume. Mm-hmm. My fear is we, as a selling community, if those of us that are new, so 2 decades ago, I might have been, I was new in the business, right? Mm-hmm. I had the good fortune of learning from those that were running value-based practices. Business buys from business. It doesn't, and people buy from people, and you have to be focused on value, delivering it, uncovering it. It has to be part of the DNA of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So your book is Unleash Your Organization's Rapid Growth Culture. Can you share a few of the big opportunities you're seeing with these changes and your top recommendations to release the chains that are holding revenue leaders back?
Yeah, I'll oversimplify it for us, but we've been doing this for a while. We've had board exposure in our lives. We've had executive team exposure. We've had from contributor up to geo leader exposure. Mm-hmm. If there is not a violent alignment on what's expected, what we're doing every day, why we're doing it, and how it benefits the entire organization, and the message is not translated the right way, then that company falls behind. And there are so many false starts in this business, as we know. Mm-hmm. Companies start up, they think they've got a great product, and they don't pay any attention to aligning the go-to-market team on a foundational baseline of skills or value-centric perspectives that their prospects and customers need. And that's the beginning of the end. Go-to-market is underserved, underinvested in a lot of ways, and understructured. And it's not the company's fault necessarily. Sometimes they don't know any better. It's not the leader's fault necessarily. Maybe it's a geo leader or even a midline or a first line leader, but they have to go do the discovery internally and align their companies on a repeatable baseline in go-to-market. Otherwise, nothing's going to work.
Now, what we're seeing is from Pavilion, almost 70%, 69% of sales reps missed quota over the past 12 months. That's a huge figure. Um, and what it's doing is it's putting more and more pressure on fewer and fewer of the successful sellers within the organization. And that's definitely going to be a recipe for growth disaster. We're certainly missing the growth goals if we can't get that across the organization. Now, you spoke about, you want your sellers to do something, you want them to change, maybe gain some of these new skills. Talk about why it's so difficult to get performance beyond just a few of the top performers. And is change the big barrier here?
You know, I don't think it is.
Okay.
If you think about how resilient we all are based on that same trailing 4 years, like all we are faced with every day is change on the business front, on the economic front, on the political front, you name
Mhm.
it, right? The pandemic, whatever, the pandemic. I mean, we're all pretty good at that. Where it starts to fall down is if that change is imminent within a company and it doesn't remain consistent with a narrative that builds and is repeatable,
Mhm.
then we lose hope. And it's back to translating the message between, it could be the baby boomer as the executive. I'm a boomer, right? Mid 50s or whatever, down to the Gen Z and the Gen X. Well, we all speak different languages. It's not Gen Z and Gen X's responsibility solely. It's the executive's responsibility to translate the proper message. They're the ones running the company. So bring everybody on the journey, and change is about setting a baseline and building trust, and then adding on top of the baseline, building more trust, adding on top of the baseline, and continuing down the same path without swinging the pendulum. So the first thing that happens when executives say one thing and do another is us as field organization, as salespeople, we shoot the gap.
Mhm.
Oh, they're not paying attention. They said this and they're doing that. I'm going to go do whatever I need to do. I just need to make my number. I'm going to scorch earth at the expense of the company.
Mhm.
And therefore, the lone wolves sometimes are the only ones making the number.
Mhm.
You got to bring that. You got to bring that scorched earth person into the fold of the change management process.
Mhm.
Make them, since they're bold and they want to lean forward, they got to be part of the narrative of why we're changing and how you got to do it a better way. So
Mhm.
my thought is you got to do it from the field and for the field, and that has to be in alignment with the executive team's narrative. And companies that don't do it that way will continue to suffer.
Mhm. Curious on a little more on the change. So I know a lot of changes happen and then we have to adjust to them. And
Yep.
then some changes we get to choose whether we want to participate or not participate. And when it comes to field teams, the choice to participate is often the barrier or the desire to participate. You talked about building trust and that
Yeah.
really being the foundation. How do you turn around someone who's choosing not to participate? And
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a very easy question. And there's different people are responsible for this problem, and we should explore all of the perspectives. But I'll tell you a story. So, and I'll reference one of our good friends that we've collaborated with together, Doug May,
Mhm.
who's he's like to me, he was my mentor on the value front. Like I totally subscribe. I'm like, okay, I see an opportunity here. We need to do this. And I'm going to learn from you, Doug, but let me share where it fits into this strategy that we're building.
Yes.
And then we're going to tell everybody exactly what's expected of them. And if they choose not to participate, then we're going to act. So we this was our when we had our wonderful run at Splunk from 10 to 17, and then Doug stayed a couple of years further. From the very beginning, we ran a 4 box: skills, abilities versus willingness. Well, the main pillar in willingness is coachability.
Mhm.
So when we would run it, we would run the 4 box in boot camp. We had a module, virtual module before boot camp. We would rate the contributors post boot camp and give that rating to their leaders. So if they weren't coachable, it was known.
Mhm.
And we hit it head on immediately. Say, look, you have to unlearn everything that you've been doing, and you're going to have to relearn the way we're building this engine because we think it's in the betterment of the company and as us as individuals. And I think we'll succeed. And we should collaborate and talk about where it works and where it doesn't. However, if you've been a salesperson and you're in an organization that's forgotten about you and lets you do your thing, it's probably not going to be the culture for you.
Mhm.
And that wasn't necessarily met with the most welcome response in the very beginning. Many of the employees at Splunk at the time, 40 million in revenue, they were building their businesses and doing a phenomenal job. And the fear was, oh, here comes big company process.
Mhm.
Oh, and we got balloons. A little bit of so now the
It's a
beauty of it
celebration.
is Godfrey, the CEO at the time, was his big proponent. His big one of his taglines was a little bit of process will set you free. And I was
Mhm.
like, okay, we're going to hang our hat on that. And so we built a very lightweight, transparent process that everyone became familiar with. And before it took a while, but the pattern matching started to stand up and show proof that if you followed the way we were designing and running the program and you were coachable and open to it, and we created coaches amongst the teams. Like we just made everybody very baseline centric on champions, value alignment, business case, sequence of the core pillars of professional selling. And
Mhm.
we made our whole lives center around those. So, and when we hired, we told the story. When we onboarded, we told the story. When we did QBRs, we told the same story. When we did strategy reviews, we told the same story. We were like a broken record, and it worked. And now we all know there's many flywheels that contribute to success stories that we see, such as Splunk. But this was one that, this played a role in it. And people said, look, if we weren't centered on these core principles, and we knew that if we weren't going along, we were going to have a hard conversation. And the way we would treat it is if you were low will more than a quarter in a row, you're going to be removed from the business. And we didn't have to do it, only a few times. In fact, there came a point where the company was asking us why turnover was so low. And it was because we were so pragmatic about when we would hire using value-based models, collaborated and built by Doug in operations. We would sell to hire in certain teams and geos with the execs by our side based on business case.
Mhm.
Go figure, we were drinking our own champagne. And we repeat. Before you know it, we had thousands of examples of success that were derived from this pattern of value-based narratives and conversations.
Now, Bart, I had the pleasure of working with you early on in the team, Doug, David Caradona, so many great people there.
Yeah.
Um, when we engaged with Splunk, like you said, it was around 40 million-ish from what I remember. It was real early in the
Yeah.
life cycle. Splunk was really successful of getting IT folks to kind of download a free sample and start
Yeah.
trying it out. And it worked. And it was very product led.
It was.
Great
Yeah.
product, right? And then lo and behold,
The
this new
that
initiative.
was
Yeah.
the there's
Yeah.
an important point to that. So it was perpetual at the time. So
Yep.
in 2010, it was a perpetual download, local download that gave you the production bits of our engine, and
Hmm.
it just had it had capacity limits on it, right?
Hmm.
So you were using what the product would be in if you were to buy it at scale. And
Yeah.
so there's three things that happened that a lot of people don't realize. We went from perpetual to term subscription to SaaS over that 7-year run.
Hmm.
So the bottom up play, which is the lightweight transaction, 5,000 at a time, 10,000, 15,000. Once we got to 3 to 5 deployments, we said, we better sit down. This is when the genesis of the value program started to kick
Hmm.
in. It's like, okay, how are they using the 5 unique deployments? What's the price point? Because it could be different divisions that bought them in an enterprise, in a global company. What's the price point of the capacity? What's the use case? They're all different. How do we normalize that? We better start modeling this internally so we can build good enterprise grade transactions, consolidate those deployments, and begin to sell at the executive level down. Because the users were admins, they were IT users. But the beauty of it at the time is Splunk was horizontal, agnostic, based on data. And data doesn't discriminate, meaning it follows a critical business service horizontally. And if you recall, in the early days, BMC software, CA, HP software, the monitoring and the business service management play, those were all silos technologies. So by the time you deployed what was going to help a critical business service do better, the service changed.
Yeah.
So it was out of date. Like, you couldn't sell that. Splunk completely went horizontal. So we had this epiphany that, when Doug joined, we needed to start modeling everything. And literally it was nonstop. Like, we at the end of the 7 years for me, with Doug by my side, literally, we probably had 50 unique use case calendars that were highly complex. And we would, depending on the merging of the unique deployments and the use cases, we could model them all as a speed to revenue, cost out of the bottom line, and risk reduction, and create it to a VP, present it to a VP or an executive, and win.
Yeah.
So that was all value-based narrative selling, business case creation, and subtle techniques throughout that process that built trust and got those that were buying in the same boat with us that were selling, on the same narrative, their words, not ours, their business outcome, not ours. And we just happened to have enough understanding that we could make it beneficial to both organizations. And that's how it played out. And we just relentlessly coaching and training. Every quarter, we trained on it. Every kickoff, we trained on it. And every QBR, we trained on it. Every strategy call, we talked about it. Every forecast review talked about the same things. It was monotonous, but at the same time, people knew what to expect.
I'd like to use the word relentless instead.
Relentless, yeah. It was relentless. What's the other word? Maniacal. Like, we're just, it's like, guys, it's not going away. You're trying to go capture millions of dollars in revenue. This is not a game.
Yeah.
You are a business person. Be a businessman, be a businesswoman, be a business, whatever you want to be. Just be on their level of business. You're not selling anything. You're solving a critical business problem for them with your technology. And that was such a revelation personally. I mean, that was a whole learning process for me. It was learning for Doug in a reverse way. He was so focused on value. He then learned you weave that into everything we do. So the value conversation starts in your first. You're aligning with a prospect. It has nothing to do with speeds and feeds. It has everything to do with what you know about them and how they operate their business, and how your enterprise technology can help them solve their problems. It's not that hard. It's just that it requires effort. That's really the point. Now, companies are at fault, by the way, because they model. So the point you brought up, Tom, low percentage of people making the number. So we're succeeding on the shoulders of few. Lumpy business. We know funding doesn't follow well with that. Money should be that's flowing to a company that doesn't have a predictable, repeatable revenue engine with linearity should be questioned, in my book.
Absolutely.
Well, we went through a period of time where nobody questioned anything, and we saw it all implode for that reason. Now AI is upon us. So as powerful as AI is to help me as an executive or a salesperson get ready for a call, it also promotes laziness. So that's going to create a really big problem for the generational sellers that are young, that aren't taught the right way, where it's
Mhm.
really slow in the beginning of the process. And AI will not get you anywhere unless you internalize the information you can crawl using AI and gather using AI and put it in terms of the customer's language, value-based terms. I think that's our biggest risk right now in the industry. And it's the biggest opportunity at the same time. So, coming full circle, I think there's a company responsibility to how numbers are modeled and how quotas are deployed, which creates what we called at Splunk. So we were really intentional because we were very seasoned executives at the helm very early. Tom Schodorf, Godfrey Sullivan, and Dave Conti. It was not about over assigning quota at Splunk. We didn't. We did it as little as absolutely possible, purely based on ramp and turnover. No other reason, which meant that we were intentional at creating a balanced performance across the team, which supported the same narrative Doug and myself and the team was running in field success, which is, hey, when you start on day one, this is what's expected of you. Here's why. We have given the benefit of the doubt to you in the field. You can make your number, and in fact, you can make $1 million a year if we do it right, based on our trajectory. And we didn't know that until about 13 or 14 that this was really working really well. And we started hitting the peak, I think 16, where Doug won the award. He jokes it because I claim the award on my credentials, although he accepted the award and we won the award based on his work from TSIA, which was all about lead generation from within the account, right? So cross account selling and demand generation based on value. Those different pockets of deployments, bringing them together, doing how you can go faster and get to market faster. You can cost out, you can reduce risk. Here are the metrics where we've done it. We've done it 5,000 times. You'll sell more, you'll go faster, and more people will succeed. And that was the award that was won. I think that was the pinnacle for us. And that's the genesis for me. And it was the genesis for Doug, who's obviously wildly successful in his journey as well. I don't know. It's been fun.
It sounds like you had a lot of cohesion among the executive team about the approach from, the beginning throughout the sales cycle. Can you share more about why it's so important to have that cohesion and then a patient commitment to achieve these outcomes?
Yeah, that is it's understated how important it is. And I'll say cohesion, the connective tissue, we call it the steel thread in the way you operate, or translating the message. So it all comes down to the executives being so coachable. So Schodorf, highly coachable. He would tell you, he was the CRO at the time, or the president, senior vice president of field operations. I was working for him and with the geo leaders as an example. We would sit in the room before QBR and we would prepare who was going to say what, so that we didn't conflict each other on the narrative. When we went to kickoff, we would create our own value narrative that Tom would present, that married what we would present, that fit into the same cohesive narrative that the geo executives presented, that then their line leaders knew they were going to hear and had to live within. And that cohesion is what created the acceleration of the company. Part of what, obviously there were many factors, but that was it was almost like a truth serum. Like, look, this is how we operate. You either can learn with us, because we're all learning and going really fast. And man, this is going to be a phenomenal experience for all of us. We all owned it. We knew it was lightning in a bottle. We were just hoping we could keep it up. And every executive team member, not every, for the most part, totally aligned. But go-to-market was really protective of that narrative. And that's what made the difference. You couldn't jump go-to-market into the field and change the narrative. Like, other organizations were not allowed to do that. And I do say it that way because it would be an offense. Like, we're really trying to have a very consistent and cohesive narrative intentionally. And as soon as we explained it that way, legal, ops, which I had ops as well, but at a point we separated value and go to market, um, field success from ops. So legal, finance, ops, product management, you name it. Hey, if you need something delivered to the field, this is the process. And we would talk about it every quarter, and we gated everything. So, and the first big, where it got really hard in the early days is we were a phenomenal company at branding, t-shirt company in the early, wonderful t-shirts, great logos, cool platform, great culture. I'm like, wow. I went from a legacy company, BMC Software, to, Splunk, which is this West Coast. And I'm like, I was
edgy. It was an edgy brand.
Yeah. And I'm like, I had to relearn all of that stuff myself. And Tom was the first person to tell me when I started. He's like, all right, you got the job. I almost didn't get the job. It was between me and another person recommended by a different executive. And he goes, and if you screw it up, I'll fire you. Literally. So that's my relationship to this day with Tom. He's my number one champion. I'm like, all right, I get it. So that's how we're going to operate. So, but does that mean you're coachable as well? Because I'm going to need your help. Absolutely. And we tried to maintain that as best possible. Some orgs struggled with it in the beginning. Marketing in general, not at Splunk, but if we talk about marketing proper, brand and awareness, in my view, is what marketing does really well. Sales and professional selling does go to market. So you cannot take a brand and an awareness message about a use case, which is speeds and feeds and how a product is consumed by a company, and pitch that to your field. You can't. They don't learn that way. You got to put it in a value message. So force management does value framework or value messaging. There's a bunch of them out there, whatever it may be. You've got to take the brand and the product message that marketing has, flip it on its side, and we better make it consumable for salespeople, for technical sellers, and for customer success. So that's called, in our view, the cross section of value. If those three, I always say, it's like there's three people. They're the cross section that faces the customer the most. If they're not on the same narrative, what does the customer think? So we trained them all on the value narrative. We trained everybody on the sales process. We trained everyone all on our tooling. And then we coached and developed, and some people came along kicking and screaming, but it worked.
Nice.
So we were fine. There were a lot of quiet conversations of stick to it. I don't even think Godfrey understood. He didn't like it all either at certain points. But Tom was he created such a layer of protection for go-to-market, because he knew from experience how fickle the selling teams are. You can hide, you can do what you want, you can break the company if you don't do it the right way by doing bad deals. And he knew our intentions were the right intentions for the right reasons, and he protected go-to-market for years from anybody disrupting what we were doing.
Yeah. Bart, what's the one piece of advice, if you had to pick just one, that you'd like to leave with our Enterprise Value Collective today?
So for the collective and for anybody watching or listening, it starts with the fundamentals on day one for everyone. And at some point, it's day one again for everybody. And this is back to the change management narrative. If a company is continuing to do it the old way, or believes they're going to do it the easy way with AI, at least at the enterprise, high-end commercial into enterprise, it's not going to work. You better reset your baseline of what's expected of all of your people that face the customer, what the narrative is, what the tooling is, what the workflow is, what the process is, and what the expectation from a role-based skills perspective is.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't adapt to that workflow and focus on the role-based skills that the company knows are required to win their market, others will outperform them. So I'll give you a prediction. Keep an eye on harness, because I know the play and I know what Doug's going to do with Carlos at harness, and they know this playbook, and they're going to go repeat it, and they're going to break through, and there'll be another beautiful example of how a cohesive narrative and a consistent cadence in coaching and developing teams to execute will change the upside of that company forever. So baseline, fundamentals, repeatable, and stick to it, and just keep increasing the skills proficiency requirement by role over time.
Thank you, Bart. We appreciate you joining the Value Coffee Talk podcast.
I'm so happy to be a part of it. Thank you. I'm honored even to be invited. So thank you for listening and sharing. I'm always learning, and I love the stories and to collaborate, because I think we're all on this journey. I think I'll be on it for a long time. I don't see us going away.
Yeah. Bart, blessed to have you. Thank you. Please sign up for the Enterprise Value Collective if you haven't done so yet. LinkedIn, geniustribe.com website. Absolutely. Hit like if you like this interview. Subscribe so you can stay up to date on the latest episodes. And until next time, our Enterprise Value Collective, keep growing and sharing together.